Good afternoon and welcome to Ex Camera. My name is Isabella Stefanescu, and before we start, I would like to do a land acknowledgement. Interhat's Matrix is located on the traditional land of the Neutral and the Anishinaabe people, specifically on the Haldeman Tract, that is 6 miles on each side of the Grand River, land that was granted in 1784 to the Haudenosaunee people. In doing this land acknowledgement, we like to remember the treaties of the dish with one spoon, which was a treaty that was made between the First Nations before the arrival of Europeans to North America. And in that treaty, what was spelled out was not only the obligations of one nation to the other, but also of people to each other and to the land. Among the things that were remarked on was that people should take only what they need, leave enough for others, and leave the dish clean. This land is today the home of many First Nation people, Métis people, and it is a land that we now work on and learn and play and make art. So Ex Camera was a series of talks by Interhat's Matrix by artists, practicing artists in various disciplines, reflecting the fact that we're an organization who does work with collaborations across artistic disciplines and artists sometimes collaborating with engineers, technologists, craftspeople, tradespeople to make interesting new work. To introduce our speaker today, before I go, I would like to outline how things are going to proceed today. I'm going to introduce Sheila McMath, who is our artistic director, to introduce the speaker. Our speaker, Diane Schoemperlen, will speak for about 45 minutes, and then we'll open it to the question and answer. If you have a question that occurs to you, you can type it in the Q&A, which is on the lower part of the bar of the Zoom, or you can keep it for the face-to-face session afterwards. So officially we're here for 1 hour, but we actually linger and open the discussion to everyone who wants to stay and join us on screen for some live interaction. What we're trying to do is reproduce in some way the lunch that we used to have after the speakers, which was an opportunity to meet each other, to kind of say who we are, what we're doing, perhaps find a collaborator among the people who show up. So welcome again, and here is our artistic director, Sheila McMath, to introduce today's speaker.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to welcome Diane Schoemperlen here this afternoon. Diane is the award-winning author of 12 books of fiction and nonfiction. She has been writer-in-residence at Queen's University in Kingston and St. Mary's University in Halifax, and is currently mentoring emerging writers through an online course offered at Humber College. She was born and raised in Thunder Bay and has called Kingston, Ontario, home since the late 80s. Her 2017 book, This Is Not My Life, a memoir that chronicles her love for a prison inmate, was the recipient of the Matt Cohen Award, an award given annually by the Writers' Trust of Canada. On a personal note, I was first enchanted with Diane's work as a young art student in the mid-90s, and I've watched her career with reasonable diligence since that time. Her first novel, In the Language of Love, was published in 1994, and the work is founded on a strict self-imposed experiment. In it, she responds concisely in about 100 words for each chapter to a standard word association test to measure sanity. Her 1998 book of short stories, Forms of Devotion, won the Governor General's Award, and it was, I speculate, her first introduction to incorporating images into her books. I remember well the foreword of the book that reads, "For my son Alexander, who said it was too bad my books didn't have pictures in them." In our conversations leading up to today, Diane and I agreed that interdisciplinary artists always feel like a novice at something. This beginner's mind is key to creativity. So although I've known Diane's work as a writer for over 2 decades, this is the first opportunity I've had to hear her talk about her work in collage in a concentrated and comprehensive way. So this will be a treat for me, and I know a treat for many people who've been colleagues and have been mentored by Diane throughout the years. It's my pleasure to welcome Diane. Thanks.
Hello.
We're good, Diane.
Are we good?
I can hear you. Yep.
Okay. Okay. So thanks for coming, everybody. I wish I could see you. This is actually the first time I've done the webinar format. So I know some people who are out there, and so I say hi personally. And there are also a couple people who have already heard me say some of these things, but sorry. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to sort of begin at the beginning, and I'm going to give sort of a short form chronology of how this all developed for me in terms of my writing and my collage. And then once I'm done that, I'm going to talk about my most recent collage work, which is a project called Create More, Worry Less, and how that project in itself has evolved through the pandemic. It really wasn't until I was asked to write an essay about my work in collage back in 2017 that I considered how my interest in visual art and writing had progressed and evolved together over a lot of years, many years. And I realized that creativity, not just for me, I think, but for everybody, can be a living, growing, ever-changing, and ever-evolving part of their lives. One thing that I learned about myself is that I am very stubborn. And so I have pursued some unusual art forms, combining them. Publishers aren't always keen on this sort of thing, but it has worked out well for me. So that I also did just want to say, and this is the part some of you have already seen, is the essay that I wrote about my adventures in collage was published as a chapbook by Woodbridge Farm Books in Kingsville. I was there for part of a week as a writer in residence back in 2017, and they produced this gorgeous chapbook, which I am going to refer to a bit through this. So, but to go way back to the beginning, back in high school, I was equally interested in writing and the visual arts. But the problem was I couldn't find a visual art form that I was actually very good at. I couldn't draw very well, I couldn't paint very well, and I was very impatient. Whereas with writing, I could spend hours, putting in a comma, taking out a comma, rearranging things a little bit. So in the end, I did cast my lot with literature, and that has worked out quite well. But looking back over my writing career, I can see that this idea of the intersection between the written text and the visual image has always been there. And in fact, Sheila, Forms of Devotion in 1998 was not my first illustrated book. My very, very first book came out way back in 1984, and it's called Double Exposures. And what it is a fictional story that I wrote to go with 48 old family photographs. So that book, little did I know at the time, really was the beginning of my now lifelong combination of the two art forms. In the next 10 years after that book came out, I did publish several normal books, normal meaning books with words only, not pictures. And the first novel, those earlier books were mostly collections of short stories, but again, as Sheila said, In the Language of Love was my first novel that came out in 1994. And in that book, the main character is a collage artist named Joanna. So one of the things I did while I was working on that book is I did a lot of research about collage, and then I started making some myself so that I felt that would help me to be able to write about her artistic life in a more knowledgeable way. And in fact, I found with collage that I had finally discovered the visual art form that I could actually do well. So that made me very happy. And I'd finally found a way to satisfy my desire to make visual art. So then it was the book after that was Forms of Devotion, which came out in 1998. And the illustrations in that one are black and white images that had gone into the public domain. So they are wood engravings, line drawings, and they're from the they're from all centuries, I guess, and they could be used without permission. And some of the way that I used them in the book is I did actually just include the image the way it originally appeared, but some of them were collages that I made by combining several of those images. They were still pretty simple compared to things that I've done since then. And yes, it was a big part of my inspiration to do that because my son had said it was too bad my books didn't have pictures in them. And I thought he had a really good point. I mean, why shouldn't adult books also have pictures in them? That shouldn't just be for kids. And that book, as Sheila mentioned, did do very well, and it won the Governor General's Award, for which I was completely shocked, because when I first submitted the manuscript, both my agent and my editor at the time were a little bit skeptical, because their questions were like, is this an art book? Is this a literary book? What is this? But they went on ahead anyway. And as I said, things turned out very well. And one of the things my editor at the time said in, the press conference right after I won is she said, we believed in this book from the beginning. And I didn't contradict her, but no, they did not. And however, it turned out to be wonderful for them and also for me. Now, but after that, again, I continued writing and publishing normal books. I knew I wanted to do another book using collage, and I wanted to do color collages. But because I had been in the publishing world for quite a while by then, I knew that was going to be a problem. It's very expensive to print color images. So I continued working away on other things, but behind the scenes, I was kind of doing my own study of collage, and I was collecting all kinds of materials, and I was still making them on my own. So now I'm going to share the screen here so I can show you what these were. So this first group of the more complicated color collages were done, in this case, the one that you can see was done to illustrate a story that I had already written. Some of them, I did the collages, but I hadn't actually written the story yet. But then things kind of took a turn, not a bad turn, in that one of the old textbooks that I had collected to use as the basis for collages kind of got me going in a different direction, which led me to my 2014 publication called By the Book. stories and pictures. And in this case, not only are the collages obviously bits and pieces, but the stories themselves are really assemblages of pieces of text from those original old textbooks. And I am, excuse me, I'm very thankful that I was able to find a publisher for this. I want to thank Dan Wells and everybody at Biblioasis for taking a chance on this crazy book. And it really was kind of me taking my desire to experiment to the furthest extreme. And it was also, as you can see from that picture, where I really first started putting the actual text fragments into the collage. I think for me, the process of adding visual elements to my written work creates all new layers of meaning and connection. The way the text and the images bounce off against each other is pretty unpredictable, and that's part of what makes it exciting. And you can't really know ahead of time until you put them together and see what happens. So for me, that process of discovering is always exciting and frequently surprising. But in the end, it still feels to me that writing is work, but making collages is play. So I do want to read just a little brief excerpt from that chapbook that I showed you at the beginning. I begin a new collage with hope and curiosity, eager to embark on a spontaneous sequence of discovery. As a person who has always liked to have a goal, a plan, or at the very least, a detailed to-do list, I find this exhilarating and liberating. Let's face it, sometimes writing is hard. Sometimes it makes me want to fling myself into the pit of despair. As Gertrude Stein said in How to Write, I return to sentences as a refreshment. I would say the same thing about collages. Sometimes I return to collage as a relief. A collage has never kept me awake all night. A collage has never made me want to bang my head against the wall. A collage has never ever made me want to tear my hair out. For this I'm thankful. I have to admit I'm rather fond of my hair. And this is how it looks after having not had a haircut for a year. There is no right or wrong way to make a collage. When perfection is not required, there can be no such thing as failure. Collage is the most friendly and forgiving art form in which the only rules are those you create for yourself. Now, one of the things that continued me on my journey into collage was really just serendipity. In the fall of 2012, when I was in the final stages of finishing by the book, I was invited to submit up to 6 pieces of my collage work to an upcoming local fundraiser called 6 Squared. So those images had to be 6 by 6 inches square, and I didn't know about this contest about this fundraiser until 2 weeks before they had to be in. So, necessity being the mother of invention, I very quickly came up with kind of a method of how to make 6 little collages in 2 weeks. And so what I did is I used the backgrounds of the Metropolitan Museum of Art page-a-day calendar that I had on my kitchen windowsill. And I used all this material that I had been collecting. And I also started cutting these bits of text fragments right out of the old books. It was a little difficult at first. The cutting up of books made me uncomfortable, but then I realized that these books were so old and not of any, literary importance that I was at least reusing them in a way that could possibly give people pleasure. So then I stopped feeling bad about cutting them up. But so, I worked on these. I called them quick studies. Long after the fundraiser was over, I just kept on making them because they really just gave me so much joy, and they were quick compared to the more complicated ones that I showed you at the beginning, which could take me a week or longer. I could do 2 or 3 of these in an afternoon. So there was an element of instant gratification with these. I won't deny that. And I found that while I was making them, the process itself tended to sort of quiet my mind and soothe my chronic anxiety. And I felt like maybe part of the relief that I was feeling with that was because I was working with my hands instead of just actually always, working out of my brain. And there's something to be said, I think, for the importance of working with one's hands. So where am I here? Okay. That year, 2012, was a hard year for me personally. Anybody who's read my memoir knows that that year was the end of a very long, complicated, and difficult relationship. And when it came to New Year's Eve of 2012, I mean, I'm not a person to make resolutions. I've never made a resolution and kept it. Most people haven't. But that year, when I thought ahead to the next year, 2013, I thought what I really want is to be able to create more and worry less. So I actually posted that little thought on Facebook, and a surprising number of my Facebook friends were also sitting at home on New Year's Eve, and everybody really loved the idea, the theme of that. And somebody suggested that I should make a calendar. So I did. I made a 12-month perpetual calendar called Be It Resolved, and each of the illustrations for the month contained the create more, worry less idea. And again, I followed the same method that I had been using with the quick studies. So I self-published that calendar, but I also learned then I'm not really an entrepreneur, sort of going around places, stores, trying to get them to stock my calendar was just not something I really enjoyed doing. So I continued making those quick studies intermittently for quite a long time, and I was posting them for sale on Facebook, and people were buying them, just snapping them up, and that actually made me, I was comfortable with that. I was not comfortable, trying to sort of sell them to stores and things. I really loved the immediacy of being able to put up what I had created on Facebook and have somebody say, oh, I want that. Again, a bit of instant gratification, I guess, but it did become an important part of the process for me, the feeling that I could immediately share what I had done. One of the hard things in the writing world is that even after you have finished your book and the publisher has accepted it and said, yes, we're going to do this, it still takes like another year at least for the book to come out. So I really liked the immediacy of this, of doing it this way. And then there was that memoir, which I mentioned, which took up a lot of time to write and time to promote. So it wasn't really until the fall of 2017 that I got back to working on this idea of create more, worry less. And then I started making them in pairs. This pair was the first actual pair of create more, worry less collages that I made. And I made them for my friend in Sudbury, Kim Fauner, who loves peacocks. So this was how I started with the idea. I wanted to do pairs because it gave me more room rather than trying to fit all the lettering on the one little space. So I continued on with this. I mean, slowly but surely. It wasn't something I was working on full time, that's for sure. And one of the problems that I had was that I couldn't get a grant. I couldn't get funding for this project. So after being turned down one too many times by the Canada Council, I actually started a GoFundMe page. And thank you to the generosity of friends and strangers, I was able to continue, albeit slowly. Thankfully, I now have some funding from the Ontario Arts Council, so eventually I will get this project finished. But in the meantime, I'm still, I've been still selling them on Facebook, and I've intentionally kept the price point very low on these. The pairs are like $50 plus $5 shipping. The singles are $25 or $20. I dropped my prices for COVID. So $20 plus $5 shipping. I've done that for a couple of reasons. One, because I really believe that everybody should be able to own a piece, even a small piece of original art. And two, because I just want to keep doing it this way. Several people have said that I could, make note cards and really make a little business out of this. But rightly or wrongly, I have resisted that impulse. I don't want to, I just don't want to go in that direction. I want to keep doing it the way I'm doing it. I'm afraid that if I tried to sort of go commercial with it, that it would really take the joy out of it. I think of writing as my business now, and making these collages is really just fun. I'm afraid of losing that part of it, so I don't want to sort of try to, commercialize the whole thing. And then along came COVID, and everybody's life was turned upside down, including mine. And although many people, sorry, I have a visitor here. Her name is Missy. Would you like to see her? Do you want to say hi? Here, okay. Although many people have been able to use these long COVID months to write and finish their novels and all of that, I am not one of them. I have found since the beginning of this that I have not been able to write very much of anything. And through it all, I could make collages. And I think part of the reason for that is because the collages are short, I don't have to sustain my focus for that long, but also because collages by their nature are kind of all over the place. And it feels to me now still that my mind is kind of all over the place. So maybe it's just the process itself fits in better with my COVID mind. So, but the project did change because of COVID. In February, I made a few more pairs of this Create More, Worry Less. But in March, when things got very scary and the lockdown came along, it seemed to me that the worry less part of things was just now completely inadequate. So I continued making the pairs with Create More on the first one, but I started using the COVID language directly on the second one. And in fact, this was also very popular, even more popular on Facebook than the previous ones. And I was delighted by that, and that did inspire me to keep doing more of them. And this was in the very early days when, it felt like we really were all in this together. Everybody was staying home and baking bread and learning how to knit or embroider and, being creative in filling that time with their families at home. And so I was very happy to continue on. And then as it went on and on, I kind of decided that I would use COVID language in both pairs. Not that creating more wasn't important. It still was important, but it just felt more and more urgent for me personally, I guess, to be creating these collages out of certainly the most difficult thing I've ever been through in my life. By May, I was using both of the COVID language on both of them. And then they started selling so quickly that I couldn't keep up. So I went back to making singles instead of pairs. And I also had to, like in all the other ones, the text fragments really were taken from these old textbooks that I had. But in the face of COVID, there really weren't enough relevant text fragments in any of those old books. So I started printing up my own text fragments on a batch of vintage paper I had been keeping for years, looking for something special to use it for. So this is what I ended up using it for. And I had to, of course, use kind of smaller lettering to fit the, the message on. I think part of my reason why I love making these little collages so much is it is a bit like a jigsaw puzzle of trying to fit everything in together. And then I started getting kind of fancier with the lettering, and I have enjoyed doing these so much. And so many people who have bought them have said it would be really good to have such a beautiful little memento of what has, for all of us, been an extremely difficult time. And then I got angry. This happened in July. By July, we were all very tired, and I, anyway, was very angry. It didn't feel like we were all in this together anymore. There were people who wouldn't wear masks, who wouldn't be careful, wouldn't observe social distancing. And I ended up feeling afraid to leave the house, even though things were opening up, and angry. So I made, this is my first angry collage, and the background is kind of a collage in itself, in that it's details of 6 paintings by Picasso. And this was the first time where I actually used a bad word. So I showed this to my son before I posted it, because I was a little bit worried. I wasn't sure how people were going to feel about the swearing. He assured me that everybody would love it, and he was so right. Everybody loved this. Everybody loved the swearing. So I continued on in the angry vein for a while. This one, with Gustav Klimt's wife, actually, in the background as the painting, was occasioned after one of those trips to the grocery store, where there was a woman who kept getting too close to me. Every time I turned around, there she was. And finally, I actually had to speak up and say politely, "Could you please back away?" And she looked at me like I was crazy. And when I came home, I said to the cat, "She's lucky I didn't kick her." So that was what kind of inspired this collage, which with the fragment on there, "Don't make me kick you," because I really, really felt so annoyed and frustrated. And then again, everybody loved it. So I felt comforted also in being able to share my anger in this art form and have other people see it and say, yes, I feel that way too. I also, and this one again is, a little bit of swearing, but also the idea that doing the right thing is not because we're afraid, it's because we are warriors and we are trying to keep ourselves and our loved ones safe. I also made a short series of 3 of these collages. I made them in the summer when the prospect of school reopening was going to change everything again. And again, these were very popular because a lot of my friends have school-age children. Some of my friends are teachers. The whole prospect of school reopening was very upsetting. Yeah. So I haven't actually made any new collages since the end of August. This is the last one that I made, in which I was maybe not quite so angry, but mostly just worried and afraid. Again, as things start opening up, then cases start going up. And I didn't stop because I was tired of making them. I stopped because my work at my real job, which is, as was explained, as a mentor for the Humber School for Writers correspondence program, started up again in September. And I love my job, and I'm very thankful, especially now, to have a job. Our program has always been online, so it was not impacted by COVID in the way that most courses have been. But it's a lot of work. And one thing I have really found, and I know other people have found this as well, is that my ability to focus and concentrate and actually work is a lot less than it used to be before COVID came along. I just can't do as much in a day as I used to do. So with my work for Humber, and I'm also at the same time editing an anthology, I feel like I have no time to make collages. But in fact, I don't think that's really true, because on the weekends, when I thought I would be making collages, I'm actually just exhausted and mostly just trying to get the chores done. And even that feels like a major accomplishment to get everything done. And I also will admit to spending far too much time playing games on my phone and watching crappy reality TV, especially 90 Day Fiancé, which is my favorite show, I confess. Because I'm tired. I'm tired inside and out. But it's been almost 3 months now since I've made a collage, and I realize part of the reason why I'm having some trouble keeping my spirits up is because I miss them. The relief that I found from making collages was really good for the soul, I think. And having not made any now for 3 months, I think I have to get back to it because I feel really not strong in myself. But I think if I can get back to making collages, that will really, really help. So I will have a month off over Christmas, and that is what I intend to do. That is my Christmas plan, is to make more collages. And I'm quite sure that my trusty assistant, Jack, is really going to enjoy that. I do have 3 cats. Jack is usually the only one who really wants, to help. So that's pretty much everything that I have planned to talk about. And now I think what I'm supposed to do is stop sharing the screen, and then we can have some questions. Am I right?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Thanks, Diane. Thanks so much. That was really great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I just, one of the things I wanted to congratulate you for say as an initial thing is, I think it's really great to, many of us are trying to keep our spirits up. We're trying to think about the future, right? We're trying to, be our best brave selves, but it's really good to, sorry, I'm just having a Zoom issue. Here, 1 second here. What's going on here? Something just happened with my screen. Yeah, can everyone see me? We're good?
I can see you, yes.
Okay. So yeah, I was just thinking that it's good to acknowledge that we're all worried and we're all have this melancholy and we have this fatigue. I think that's what it is. Like that thing you said about how everything feels more difficult. Like, it's hard to get as much done in a day. And like, part of why we're trying to meet in this context here, right, as creative people, is to be candid about that, right? And to just kind of not pretend that everything is fine, because that's even more exhausting, right?
Well, it is.
Yeah. So, I mean, I wanted to compliment you for that and say that it's brave to just acknowledge the moment, right? And the myriad emotions that are happening. And I've actually found, I don't know if this is useful to you as a maker, a writer, and a parent, but my son, who's 5, he's adapting, I think, far better than many people in their teens, 20s, and adult ages, because frankly, we have to remind him, for instance, to take his mask off when he gets home. He'll wear it for 20 minutes to half an hour. So, it just is a sort of, it's an illustration of the resilience of children, and the fact that, perhaps, I'm trying to learn from him about how to get through this, right? It's really interesting time. So, and I'm happy that you're planning to make more collages, because I think ultimately what it's doing is just letting people know that what they're feeling is it's a shared experience that we're all having right now.
Yeah.
So,
well, I guess if I was going to summarize about that, I would say, like, some days I'm okay, but some days I'm not. Yeah. And that's okay too. Mm-hmm. Because I think, it to me, it doesn't seem, I'm not a good person to pretend anything anyway, but the energy that it takes to sort of pretend that you're okay, I haven't got that. And I don't think that's helpful either. And that's why that last collage that I made in the COVID edition was, are you okay? Because, I'm finding we still have that knee-jerk response to the question, how are you? We still say, oh, I'm fine. Mm-hmm. But we're not fine. So I think people should really try to skip over the knee-jerk response and just say, no, I'm not okay, and this is really hard. And it truly, to me, it doesn't feel like we're all in this together anymore. And there are specific people that I want to be in this with, and those are the people who are trying to stay safe, wearing the masks, doing the social distancing. I don't want to be in it with those other people. I only want to be in it with the smart people. And it's awful in this second wave. Things here in Kingston are still much better than they are in all the hot zones. So we are still very lucky here. But I hate feeling afraid every time I leave the house. And that in itself is exhausting. And so it's not so much that I was ever, a hugely sociable person. I just would like to be able to go about my daily business without having to feel afraid. Mm. And maybe we'll get there. We will get there eventually, but some days that's overwhelming.
So there's a question here in the chat that is a process question that you might find refreshing. It says, from Chloe Moore, who might be one of your students, I'm not sure. It says, do you plan out each collage, or do you just figure it out as you go?
I figure it out as I go along.
Okay.
And I think that's one of the reasons why I find it so much more refreshing sometimes than writing. I don't have any particular goal for each collage other than I want it to turn out looking pretty and interesting. So I always start with the background, and then I always put the main message lettering on first. And then after that, I just keep playing around with all my hundreds of pieces of little things until I get something that works. And sometimes, the little pieces are put in because they're in the right color frame, or sometimes they're the right size, or so yeah, it's really just a kind of an unplanned process. And as I said, I think for me, being a person who's like totally an over planner, an overthinker, I'm not a spontaneous person at all, to have found this process, which is the opposite of how I usually am. That's part of why I find it so rejuvenating.
That's great. So there's a question here from Lindy
Metchevsky. Hi, Lindy.
Yes. So it says, Diane and X Camera, thanks so much for this wonderful event. As you know, Diane, I love your collages, and I'm so interested in this art forum. I have 2 short questions for you. Mm-hmm. Do you make sure the images used are all out of copyright, or does the process of layering the images change them significantly to avoid copyright issues? And then she says, do you print off the individual letters using a printer, or how are they made? Again, another process question.
Yeah. So about the copyright issues, I'm not 100% sure about that. I'm just kind of going on here. But I have read in a number of places when I've tried to Google it that because they are altered so much, that changes copyright issues. The backgrounds, as I said, are from calendars. So I'm just kind of assuming that the Metropolitan Museum of Art will not sue me.
Yeah, I remember that in my old sort of printmaking days, that if you alter an image at least 3 ways, that you're sort of out of the realm of copyright worry. So, and this,
I'm kind of going by that. Yeah. And a lot of the little pieces that I use are actually copyright free.
Right. Yeah. And the ones you mentioned, the ones in the Forms of Devotion book were all sort of in public domain, right?
Yes, those ones definitely all were.
For sure.
Yeah. And then, what was the second question?
And then she says, do you print off individual letters using a printer, or how are they made?
Well, yeah, the lettering, that gets to be kind of a problem. I keep running out of letters, and I have tried printing them up, but they never come out just right. I don't have a super duper printer, so I'm always collecting letters. So I've bought sheets of lettering. They actually have them at Staples, stick-on letters that are meant for signs. So the sort of the larger ones and the little small ones. And then I put them on a colored background. I use a lot of those. But also in stores, like when we used to go to stores, Michael's and Minotaur downtown here in Kingston, they have ready-made lettering that you can buy. So pretty much everything I've used is stuff that I have bought. And that, it's always a worry, because I have these, feel like I'm going to run out of letters, and then I have to try to figure out how to get more letters. And those little square gold ones, I found those in packages at one of the dollar stores here years ago. And I kept going back and buying like 10 packages at a time, so I wouldn't run out. But now I have run out almost, and I can't find them anywhere. So if anybody out there knows a good source of letters for collage, please let me know.
And just a question is occurring to me as you're talking about images and copyright. Like a lot of the images that you use in your collage feel like they're around, like at least 100 years old, like, right. Between, like, sort of in that range. And I think about that sort of in connection to the last time we went through this, right? The last time we went through a pandemic was about 100 years ago. And so there's this kind of timely experience of reading the text, right? This is the text that you're using in it are the the things we're hearing over and over again right now. And maybe, I guess it's similar to what was said 100 years ago. It's like that timeless and timely thing going on, right? In terms of the imagery, right? It's interesting.
I actually hadn't thought about that. I hadn't thought about that. I mean, because I just love the vintage feel of the images from the beginning. And you're right though. But I hadn't made that connection. That the images I'm using, they do have maybe sort of a bit of a ghostly echo back to the last time this happened in 1918, or was that the year? I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and that image of Gustav Klimt's wife just looking like glaringly out at you, like, for real, I'm being serious. This is you have to listen, heed the warnings, right? It's that kind of arresting gaze or stares, like very. Yeah, sort of timeless. It's amazing. It's really interesting. Anyway, but that's an interesting coincidence. So maybe I'm going to go back here. There's, it's hard to know if people want me to read all of these out loud. Some of them feel like kind of private things to you.
Should I?
Meg Fear is here, and she says, Diane, I'm so very happy to have a pair of commemorative COVID collages to remind my family to wash our hands. Wonderful to hear the history behind this process.
Hi, Meg. Thank you. Meg lives one street back from me, so if you're at home now, we're still close, even though we're not seeing each other in person.
And then Denise Beaton shared at the beginning of the Q&A. She said that an expression that's resonating for her during COVID is that people are sort of slow to respond, like they don't have the bandwidth to handle what's going on right now. And I think in some cases people are reaching out to each other, but there does seem to be kind of a delay in communication that's going on. And I'm trying to be sort of just very kind to others and kind to myself about that too, right? It's tough. It's challenging. So
it's very tough. Hi, Denise. I do know these people. It's wonderful when people.
Yeah, I have to say, I had a look at all the people who've attended today, and it's refreshing to have so many new names. It's great. You've brought your people, Diane. It's great.
I brought my people. Yeah, I'm so happy to have people.
It's really, really great.
And I realize that everybody's getting a bit tired of Zoom, but I think it's been a really important way of sort of at least being able to carry on conversations, even though it's not in person. I do know that one of the things that I have personally found very difficult about all of this is that I live alone now. My son moved out in 2019 before this. And although I'm very thankful that he lives within like a 7-minute drive and we do see each other once a week, living alone through this presents its own set of challenges as well. And I know for myself, I'm not always good at reaching out when I should, because I don't want to bother anybody, or I'm afraid, that they'll be too busy. But Zoom has actually been a really nice way of being able to see people and talk to people. And there have been times through this where I have thought I've almost lost the ability to have an intelligent conversation. Because, I'm talking to the cats most of the time. And although they are good company, the conversation kind of lags a bit.
Oh, boy. Well, it's great. Thanks again, Diane.
Thank you very much. This has really been fun.